Welcome to the first episode in a new Legendarium series about the life of Henry the Young King. In Part 1, A Playboy Prince, we will talk about the early life of Henry III Plantagenet and how the course of his life was changed by his father's decisions and feuds. Henry III Plantagenet, later called Henry the Young King, was born on February 28, 1155. He was not meant to be king, being the younger brother of William, 3 years old at the time of Henry's birth. Yet in August 1155, William died, making Henry heir to the throne. His mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, was a remote woman who disappeared for long stretches of time for her travels across England and the continent. As a child, young Henry spent more time with his wet nurse, taking milk from the right breast, believed to give richer milk. At the age of 5, in November 1160, his father, King Henry II, betrothed young Henry to Margaret of France, daughter of Louis VII, King of France. Her dowry was the disputed territory of Vexin, though the couple would not actually meet until many years later. Young Henry grew up in the most privileged stratum of Norman English society, one of 200 families descended from followers of William of Normandy, who conquered England in 1066. Beneath the French-speaking aristocracy, 1.5 million English toiled in anonymity on French-owned estates. None of them would rise to greatness or even leave their home village. This cruel occupation included a slow genocide, with native males displaced or killed, and the most desirable English women taken as wives or concubines by the foreign overlords, who had nothing but contempt for England and the English. Young Henry grew up on the move, as his father Henry II kept a mobile court to keep restless vassals frightened into obedience, since they never knew when the king would show up for dinner. Most of the time, young Henry traveled with a court of 100 royals, counselors, and hangers-on. Even Henry's family members could come and go when sent to a noble house for fostering and further education. Indeed, when young Henry was 8 years old, Henry II sent him to the house of Thomas Becket. He did not stay long, as Henry II and Becket, the Archbishop of Canterbury, had their infamous falling out in 1164 when Becket refused to use the archbishopric to do King Henry II's bidding. Soon after, Becket went into exile in France along with 400 of his followers. Young Henry was fond of Becket and deeply resented his father for removing him from the kingdom. In time, he came to find the business of his father's court quite boring, but found adventure and excitement in the tournament circuit. In the 1100s, tournaments were not an orderly ritual with strict rules. Instead, 2 teams of heavily armored and mounted knights charged each other and then chased each other across miles of countryside, fighting with real weapons and sometimes losing limbs, if not their lives. A knight could only save himself by crying, "Peace!" but had to pay a ransom to the man who captured him or forfeit his horse and armor. For young Henry, the tournament scene meant a steady income, as he had one of the greatest tourney fighters of the age in his entourage, Sir William Marshall. Renowned as the greatest warrior in Christendom, Marshall once took 103 knights prisoner in a single year of tournament fighting. As young Henry grew to adolescence, he used his share of the Marshal's winnings to maintain a personal court of flatterers and lackeys, and to learn more about William Marshall, follow the link in the description. In January 1169, young Henry found himself with real responsibility. King Henry II traveled to France to arrange a marriage between Henry's second son Geoffrey and Countess Constance of Brittany. King Henry II also wished to arrange a reconciliation between himself and the renegade Archbishop Thomas Becket. The marriage went through, but the reconciliation with Thomas Becket did not. King Henry II snubbed Becket by crowning 15-year-old Henry king-in-waiting, a practice that dated back to 10th century France. In a lavish coronation, young Henry became king-in-waiting of England, Duke of Normandy, and Count of Anjou and Maine. Becket excommunicated the bishops who performed the ceremony, but that did not stop the celebration. Indeed, during the feast, Henry angered his father by joking about King Henry's relatively humble birth being the son of a count, while young Henry was the son of a king. This coronation escalated the feud between King Henry and Archbishop Becket, who refused King Henry's offer to recrown the young king. Becket continued to excommunicate royal officers until 4 knights, possibly acting on King Henry's orders, murdered Becket in the cathedral. This set the whole of Europe into an uproar. Meanwhile, Henry the young king formally married Margaret on August 27, 1172 at Winchester Cathedral. His father, King Henry II, had himself publicly flogged to atone for his role in Becket's murder. Yet King Henry still refused to give young Henry any real power or even money. To keep up his court and entourage, Henry still had to go begging to his father for pocket money that would ultimately lead young Henry to raise the sword of rebellion against his father. And the murder of Thomas Becket would be the perfect excuse for turning adolescent rebellion into a crusade. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.